Hey everyone, and welcome to another Yogi Misfit Sessions. This is episode 28. On today's show, I have my buddy Mike Lewis on the show. He is the founder of a community called When to Jump. And it's basically, he talks a lot about it, and he can explain it better than I can, but it's a group of people that come together and, they start supporting each other in the sense that they're doing something that they don't want to do for a living or part of their life, and they take the jump and make the leap to something else. This book and the story is so just near and dear to me just because I just did that a few years ago. I left bartending to become a yoga teacher, and now I've got a yoga podcast and things like that, so that's weird. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the show. And of course, if you love the show, please leave a review. It helps us out. So, Mike, welcome to the show. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm pumped to be here.
Yeah, super stoked to have you. How's your day going?
It's good. It's good, busy, but no complaints. I guess it's better busy than bored, as they say.
Yeah, I was waiting to hear all the craziness because I know you got a lot going on right now.
I do. Yeah. Well, it's fun. I think it's a fun time and learning a lot right now. A lot of firsts for me, and just trying to keep it all together and do the best I can each day. So making it through another one.
So for those that are just tuning in, Mike is the founder of When to Jump, and it's an awesome project. Actually, I should let you talk about it because you're the founder of it. So
no,
Mike,
actually, I
talk about When to Jump.
You talk about it. No. So When to Jump is a curated community that helps enable professional and personal jumps of all types for people of all kinds. And so we've got a media platform that's digital media, podcasts, and then, of course, a book that Danny's in coming out in just a couple months. We have in-person festivals, and we collaborate with leading brands and lifestyle organizations all around doing what you love and going for it. And just like your story, Danny, taking a chance and facing fear to do what you love. And so it came from a very personal perspective for me and a decision I was going through, a few years back. And it's been neat to see the community form and kind of rally around that.
So how did it all start for you?
It's pretty funny. I was actually never intending to go into starting something like this. I was sitting in my office a few years ago and had a crazy idea that wouldn't go away. I grew up 10 years prior in Southern California and discovered a European sport that's somewhat rare in the United States called squash, which is a racket sport, kind of like tennis, a close cousin, I guess, played indoors. And there's only a couple, courts within probably 100 miles of where I lived. But at the time, it just felt like what a cool opportunity to pick up something that was new and different and see where it would take me.
Sure.
And so for me, I remember sitting at I think it was my kitchen table, and we had a professional player, because believe it or not, there's a professional squash tour that goes around the world. And he had stopped in Santa Barbara where I was living, and I convinced my parents to let us host him, because in the squash world, believe it or not, you don't make a ton of money playing these tournaments. So they put you up with a family when they can. And sitting across from this gentleman, this young, he was a teenager, 19 years old, and he was telling me about traveling the world playing this sport that we both loved. I knew I wanted to do it. And 10 years later, I was in my office in Boston, and I realized that just wasn't going to be something that someone would give me permission to go do.
Right.
I needed to decide I'm going to go, take a chance and play professional squash. And as many of us know, whether it's a job or a relationship or education or whatever you may be in life, there's kind of a staircase and there's a progression of things you're supposed to do. And for me, I just graduated a few years earlier. I had a job that looked good on paper, and I felt a lot of stress to decide when to go, maybe leave it, and even who to talk to. And so When to Jump really came out of my decision to kind of put everything on hold and say, I'm going to reach out to people like you, Danny, and others who had left something comfortable whether they were being an electrician or a teacher or a lawyer or an accountant, and took a chance to become a yoga instructor or to make a paint shop or form a band. And I just started collecting these stories, and I told my friend next door in the office that this should be a book, but really a community. And I called it When to Jump because that just seemed obvious. That's a great question to ask ourselves of, when do you jump? And about a year and a half later, after collecting the stories, I was encouraged to go do it and jump myself. And I moved to New Zealand, and a few months after that, the project really started going. Sadly, because my buddy who was with me the night I had the idea for When to Jump, he had always been asking me, when's it coming out? When's that book going to get made? You got to go forward on it. And I'd always be like, yeah, it's coming, whatever. And nothing was ever really happening with it. And tragically, he passed away in an accident when I was a couple months into my trip in the South Pacific.
Oh, wow.
And
wow.
Yeah, at that point I said, okay, I'm going to just finish this project. And that's when it was born. That was several years ago now.
And so all this momentum has now brought you into where you're at now. I mean, I distinctly remember the day we sat down and kind of chatted, and I was like, this is really cool. I like this. And I was going through something like that as well, So I had to I was really interested in what you were doing and how, it really made me think about how many people want to do that. They want to leave the thing that they hate doing to go do the thing that they love to do.
Yeah. Oh, I totally remember that. We sat outside at a Cafe La Vie, and we were chatting, and I just felt like you are such an embodiment of what we, strive for in our community and what we encourage people to go do. And for folks, we can get into the book in a minute, but who will get to read your story, that's exactly what it's about. I think you have a very honest, authentic perspective on what it means to jump, and very much true to the core of our mission. You don't sugarcoat it, and neither does kind of any of the other people in our community. And that's what it's about is, there's enough stuff on Instagram and Facebook news feeds to tell us what, a dream looks like, but what does it actually feel like when you're going for it? And I think that's what, your story reflects, and hopefully all the others in the book.
Yeah, no, I think, the other thing is too, it's nice to know that you're not the only one going through it, and to have that support in the community around you is super important.
Totally. I think that's exactly it. I remember Googling when to chase dreams, and I couldn't find other people like you or me or others that just could talk about it. And,
I thought Google knows everything.
I know. I thought it did too. Doesn't know everything. The stuff that was coming back was all, it was kind of the end result or the aspirational messaging. But what I wanted was, was the real deal, the real talk. And, that was hard to find. And when you find it, like I did, when I was cold calling people and getting their stories and writing them down, it was like, wow, you can do what you love, and you can even live to tell about it. Oh, and by the way, it's actually something you don't regret. It's all these little things started to pop up that were like, why aren't more people talking about this?
How many stories did you collect?
Unofficially, I collected hundreds through conversations and whatnot. I collected a portion of those by reaching out to folks on Skype and other things, interviewing them, by voice, and then recording and getting transcribed their interview. And I started, I think I told you I had one story done when I left, one official story done with the U.S. Senator from Maine, mm-hmm. who was a journalist before he got into politics and had a bunch of other careers. And then when my friend passed away, I kind of went from one story to really good, clean stories. I probably had 6 or 7 a year later when I came back to California and started to kind of figure out what to do with this project. And at that point, I probably, again, talked to dozens and dozens of people, but had written down the transcription and edited the kind of clean version of stories with, folks like Michael Lewis, the finance author, and the first female bishop in the Anglican Church, who was a
Whoa.
PR executive.
Wow.
Yeah, she was PR before going to the church, and the second baseman for the Cubs, who left the Cubs to go to college. All these crazy jumps were kind of the first bunch that I zeroed in on.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Oh yeah, go for it.
I was going to say, let's talk more about the book.
Okay. Yeah. So that was actually what I was going to say too, because that leads us to where this is all going.
Right. Let's. We both go quiet.
which is the book.
Yeah, the book.
Yeah. So the book period. Pause. I think your audience must be just waiting for the
Yeah.
the next card to
Actually, let's just give him another like moment of silence. Wait even more.
turn.
Okay.
Okay, we're good. All right, we're good. We can talk about the book. We can talk about the book.
All right.
Yeah. The crazy thing about the book is like there is the first story that I captured was in April of 2013, and the book
Okay.
comes out January of 2018.
Okay.
So it's been truly a 5-year project, and it actually started before that in January of 13. I had one conversation in general with a woman who's actually not in the book, but helped inspire me to kind of put forth these stories. And I sketched a cover page after our conversation, and that cover page I still have, and was, that'll be 5 years to the month to when the book comes out. And so today, the book looks a little bit different. It's not just a bunch of stories. We have over 40, I believe 44 case studies from all different types of folks. You are the only yoga instructor in the book, I will say that.
Oh, wow, cool.
But yeah, actually, and the only ex-bartender in the book too.
Nice.
We do have a restaurateur, but we've got, what makes it unique is that it's a little bit of something for everyone. The stories range from baby boomers to millennials, first generation immigrants, college dropouts, single parents, going into things that range, the whole gamut, from philanthropy to tech to entrepreneurship to small business to music and entertainment and the arts. And I think what's nice is that some of the jumps are big, but some of the jumps are small. Some of them are, internal jumps you can make within your own life and maybe on the side of your job and your career, and not necessarily big jumps, but just, a new hobby or doing something on the weekends. And then what's neat is they asked me to write more of my stories. So I've, I shouldn't say what is neat. Hopefully it's neat to people who read it. It's kind of me sharing the process of preparing to jump. And it outlines the phases that I feel like make the jump, which are kind of like the main framework of the book. So I separate the stories into 4 common phases, and each phase will start with my own narrative as it relates to that phase, and then 10 or 12 stories that relate to that phase, and then summaries and take. Yeah, and then
Nice.
And then the next phase starts.
I love that. That's so smart. That's a great way to put it together. And we get to discover you while we discover other stories as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like you'll hear my bit, and then the next story after mine, I think in the beginning, the first story in the book is a karate school studio manager who left to become a writer and failed, and then ultimately stuck with it and wrote Sleepless in Seattle. So it's just a totally different story than mine.
So, all right. So we got the book coming up, and we, obviously the project's starting to happen. Where do you see this going? What do you see as like the big picture for When to Jump?
Well, my vision is a really big one, and maybe it's ambitious, but I feel like with these types of things, you want to think big. We're not selling a product or a service. We're selling a way to think about your life, and we're not even selling it. We're just bringing people together around it. And so in my dream and my kind of vision, When to Jump has an incredibly active, diverse, global community that engages, online through, different rich media forms. It's a directory for people to look up folks that want to jump in different places. So if you're in Chicago and you're on business and you're thinking about becoming a musician, you can look up your When to Jump network directory, and you can find jumpers who have left, being a lawyer to become a musician.
Got it.
And
Got it.
you can confide in that group. We would have member festivals once a year. I kind of glossed over this, but we had a major festival last year in the fall, almost this time exactly last year, where we had just incredible outpouring of support for a festival that combined a farmer's market, a music festival, and a speaker series all in one. And that grew nearly double to this year, where we had it span the course of a weekend across the country. And we hope to keep growing in that way every year. And so in my vision, it's a member directory, it's an active community, and then there's obviously in-person participation opportunities where people can really come together and have good food and drink good drinks and meet great people all around, this support and proof that you can do what you love.
So someone comes up to you and says, Mike, I want to jump. What do you say?
always say great, but think it through.
Okay.
And I say that because I think, again, in our pop culture driven society where it's sexy to, move to Bali and never come back and say, like, to hell with it.
Eat, pray, love.
And I know this audience probably loves going to Bali, so I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I love Bali just as much as the next yogi, but no, like I think there's a discourse that's in culture today where it's like you're unhappy. I think there's a statistics like last year, 51% of Americans were unsatisfied with their job, and that was the lowest it's been in years. And so I think people are typically not very happy these days in what they do,
Sure.
or at least the majority. But it's just too impulsive to be like, I'm going to just stop everything and quit because the dust will settle. And then you'll be like, well, what am I doing? And I think that doesn't set up for success. And so from my perspective, I think you really, you want to think things through, not because you'll second guess yourself and talk yourself out of jumping, but in fact, the opposite. If you do jump, you'll be like, hey, I did everything I can, or that was in my power to ensure success. And that ultimately is the most important thing. And success is really just jumping. It's just being thoughtful about it. So I would say, wait, think it through, and then proceed.
What is the biggest thing that you've learned by going through this? I mean, not even just like the book writing process, right? And like collecting these stories, but like through this entire process of your jump, others' jumps, your first event that you had, and now bringing it to this point. Like, what's the biggest thing you've taken from this?
Oh gosh, you're a great interviewer, Danny. Seriously, if the yoga thing doesn't work out, you got a job in like broadcasting and journalism.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I think that's a really good question. Let me think. As cheesy as it sounds, and I think you probably would agree with this, but like if you have a passion and you think it can help others, I think if you build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that means overnight they will come, but I just remember, coming back from playing pro squash and having like a little bit of money left and, living out of my backpack and cooking eggs and just like being on my buddy's couch and still pushing so hard on these stories. Like even earlier when I was telling you, when I came back, I had 6, 7 stories. Like I was ruthlessly editing these stories that I had no idea what they would do. Like I didn't really know what purpose they would serve, but I knew they should be around. And, one of the funny stories of that is it was around the holidays and I was at a foundation kind of fundraising dinner for the holidays. And I wasn't even supposed to be there, but I stopped by and they had a keynote speaker there who I didn't even know was going to be there. And we ended up sitting next to each other. And she asked me what I was up to. And I was like, I really want to start this community. I don't know exactly what the next step is, but here's what I'm up to. And, it turned out that, the lucky kind of, I guess community gods were on my side and media gods were on my side. And that person turned out to be Ariana Huffington, who was the keynote for that foundation event that I was supposed to be at.
That's awesome. I remember this story actually. Yeah, it's all coming back. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it wasn't even like, oh, that was so lucky, but it was lucky. But what wasn't lucky was like I was building it for so long. Like it was now 2 years of just like, really on the hustle to get these stories out and like to kind of share them. And so I showed them years of all this work. And then it prompted the next thing, which turned into a really successful media partnership that we launched, which reached millions and millions of people. And so it was just for me, it was like, if you put this stuff together, like, it's cheesy, but The Alchemist, I think, is popular for a reason, because I think that's true. Like you put it out to the world and like, it's going to come back to you and people are going to want to support it. And it's really scary still. I'm sure as you find, like you go into, your new initiatives and all the work you're doing around yoga and health and wellness, and who you don't know if anyone will follow, but it should be out there. And I think it's taking that step that I've learned so much about, where it's just do it, and you'll be surprised at what kind of follows and what people, because a lot of people don't want to necessarily do that themselves, but they want to support you in that journey. And so you just have to take kind of a leap of faith.
Got it. That makes sense. And I think it's so true, man. Like if I do think that if you put it out there, they will come. I just kind of, went through this yoga thing being like, I don't care. I just love this thing. This is the one thing that I want to do for the rest of my life. I'm just going to do it. and
Yeah.
knock on wood, it's worked out. I mean, so far.
No, totally. And what I love about your story was like you had to have someone sit you down and be like, why don't you just do the thing that you enjoy doing more often? And you're like, oh, that makes sense. It's like sometimes you just need somebody that knows you to be like, why don't you just do more of what you like doing?
You're like, oh yeah, about that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's funny how that works.
That's awesome, Mike. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I know we have an event coming up, and it'll all be in the show notes, and I'm going to make sure that I leave your links. And I mean, I just can't stress enough to people that are listening. This community is so important, and I didn't realize I was even a part of it until afterwards. And now it's even now I'm still like, wow, that it needs to happen.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I'm sure you'll put this in the notes, but people want to check out the book. It's already open for pre-order. We're not going to do a big push till you and I do some neat stuff around the launch itself in January, but we have all the info on whentojump.com/book. So check it out. And thank you, Danny, for being such an advocate. And you've just been, I think, a real leader. Like people look up to you, not just for your talents in the kind of studio, but for your philosophy and your approach to not only the good stuff that comes with jumping, but the tough times and the failures and the resilience. So keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, until the next Yogi Misfit session, this is Danny and Mike saying peace out.